She thought she had the perfect marriage until she discovered the hidden truth. The evening air buzzed with laughter and the soft clink of glasses as I stood in the kitchen, putting the final touches on an elegant spread of hors d'oeuvres. Candlelight flickered gently against the polished surfaces, casting a warm glow over our home. I glanced toward the living room, where Eduardo stood, captivating our guests with one of his signature anecdotes. He always had that effect, drawing people in effortlessly, his smile infectious, his laughter genuine. A surge of pride swelled inside me. This was our life. A seamless blend of love, laughter, and success. "Laura, can you pass the wine?" Eduardo called, his voice smooth and inviting. I turned, my heart fluttering as our eyes met. "Of course, darling," I replied, my voice steady, though a familiar warmth rushed through me. He looked effortlessly handsome in his tailored suit, moving with the kind of grace and confidence that made it impossible not to notice him. "I think our guest could use a refill," he added with a playful smile. As I poured the rich, crimson wine into their glasses, I overheard fragments of conversation, friends sharing stories, laughter erupting like fireworks. The scene around me felt picture-perfect. I had worked hard to create this moment, and seeing it unfold so beautifully filled me with a sense of accomplishment. "Laura, this is incredible," Melissa, one of our close friends, exclaimed, her eyes bright with delight as she bit into the bruschetta. "You've really outdone yourself tonight." Her compliment warmed me more than the wine ever could. "Thank you. I just wanted to make it special for everyone," I said, my smile genuine, pride swelling in my chest. Eduardo joined me at my side, sliding an arm around my waist and pulling me close. "She always does," he said, his voice dripping with admiration. I leaned into him, savoring the solid warmth of his body next to mine. As the evening flowed on, I found myself watching Eduardo more closely. His laughter still rang out, charming as ever, but something was different. There was a subtle distance, a tension lurking beneath his usual ease. His gaze would flicker away, lost in thoughts I couldn't quite reach. I tried to brush the feeling aside. Tonight was supposed to be perfect, but the unsettling sensation persisted. Later, as the party reached its peak, I caught sight of something that made my pulse stutter. Eduardo's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted. So slight, I almost missed it. His shoulders tensed, his smile faltered, just for a moment. "Who's that?" I asked lightly, handing him a fresh glass of wine, trying to keep my tone casual. He picked up the phone quickly, brushing his fingers over the screen before flashing me a reassuring smile. "Just work stuff," he said, his voice smooth but lacking its usual warmth. "Nothing important." I nodded, but a small knot of unease began to form in my stomach. I told myself I was imagining things. After all, Eduardo was always busy with work. Maybe a little too much lately, but nothing I should worry about. "You're working so hard these days. Maybe you should take a break soon?" I suggested, hoping to ease the tension I was feeling. He chuckled, but the sound seemed hollow, not quite reaching his eyes. "You know how it is," he said, his voice light but distant. "Just a few more late nights and it'll settle down." Hello guys, if you like our stories and haven't subscribed yet, support our work and subscribe to the channel. To help us. I smiled, trying to let the moment pass, but my thoughts kept circling back. Eduardo was rarely evasive, especially in front of our friends. The laughter around us felt distant now, fading into the background as doubt took root. I wanted to believe him, to trust that everything was as perfect as it seemed, but something had shifted and I couldn't ignore it. "Laura, come join us." Melissa's voice broke through my reverie. I blinked and smiled, pushing the gnawing worry to the back of my mind. I forced myself into the conversation, joining the laughter and lightheartedness of the evening. But deep down, I could feel the first cracks in the perfect life I thought we had. That night marked the beginning of a journey I hadn't anticipated, one that would challenge everything I believed about love and trust. As the days slipped by, the unease only grew. Eduardo seemed more distant with each passing week, his late nights at the office becoming more frequent. He often returned home long after I had fallen asleep, leaving me to lie awake, staring at the empty space beside me, wondering where he had been. I questioned myself, replaying moments in my head, wondering if I had done something to push him away. One evening, determined to confront the growing divide between us, I stayed up, waiting for him. The clock's ticking filled the silence of our dimly lit living room. Shadows flickered on the walls as I scrolled aimlessly through my phone, pretending to distract myself from the heavy weight in my chest. When the front door finally creaked open, I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Still awake? Eduardo's voice was casual, but there was something off about the way he carried himself as he stepped inside. His jacket slung over one arm, tie loosened. "I was starting to worry," I said, forcing a smile. "You've been working late a lot." He shrugged, the gesture too nonchalant. "Yeah, just a busy season. You know how it goes." I nodded, but the tension between us hung in the air, unspoken. "Is everything all right at work?" He nodded, glancing away. "It's fine, just hectic." His phone buzzed again, breaking the quiet, and I watched as his eyes flicked toward it. Just a brief hesitation, but enough to make my pulse quicken. "Another work message?" I asked lightly, hoping to mask the concern in my voice. Eduardo picked up the phone and swiped the notification away quickly. "Yeah, just a client. Nothing important." His tone was dismissive, but it stung more than I wanted to admit. "Eduardo!" I hesitated, unsure of how to voice the turmoil brewing inside me. "You've seemed different lately. Distant. Is something else going on?" For a brief moment, his expression softened, a flicker of guilt or perhaps regret flashing across his face. But just as quickly, his guard was back up. "Laura, you're overthinking it. I've just been busy, that's all." Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe it was all in my head. But the unease lingered, gnawing at me like a relentless itch. And with each passing day, the wall between us seemed to grow taller, more impenetrable. That night, as I lay in bed, the quiet hum of the city outside barely registered. What did register was the soft, persistent buzzing of Eduardo's phone in the stillness, its sound louder in the silence. My curiosity had been bubbling under the surface for weeks now, gnawing at my sense of peace, stronger than my desire to respect his privacy. After a few minutes of restless shifting, I couldn't resist any longer. I slipped out of bed, careful not to make a sound, and padded down the hallway. The light from the living room was dim, and there, bathed in the cold glow of his phone, sat Eduardo. His back was to me, fingers flying over the screen in a way that suggested urgency. The light illuminated his face in harsh angles, casting shadows that made him look unfamiliar, almost haunted. I stood frozen for a moment, my heart pounding. Should I confront him? Or should I turn around and pretend I hadn't seen anything? Retreat back to the safety of my ignorance? "Eduardo?" I called softly, my voice barely above a whisper. He flinched, turning sharply to face me. His eyes, wide with surprise, immediately narrowed as he set the phone down, too quickly, like a child caught doing something wrong. "Hey," he said, his voice too casual, his smile too forced. "What's up? Who are you texting?" I asked, my throat dry as the words hung in the air, thick with accusation. His eyes flicked away from mine, and my stomach twisted in response. "Just a colleague," he replied, his tone light but not convincing. He wouldn't meet my gaze. I took a step forward, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "Why do you seem so tense? You've been acting different lately." He sighed, raking a hand through his hair, a gesture that might have looked casual if not for the tightness in his shoulders. "I'm tired, Laura. Can't a man unwind after a long day?" There was an edge in his voice that hadn't been there before, defensive, cold. It threw me off balance. "It just feels like you're hiding something from me," I said, my voice trembling slightly, betraying the anxiety gnawing at me. "I don't want to feel like this, Eduardo." For a brief moment, he looked like he might close the gap between us, take me in his arms, and tell me everything was fine. But instead, he shook his head, retreating both physically and emotionally, the space between us growing wider. "You're imagining things," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm still the same man you married." But was he? If he were the same man, Why did I feel so lost? It was as if the foundation of our life together had begun to crumble, leaving me standing on a tightrope, the ground shifting beneath my feet. "Eduardo, please," I whispered, my voice barely steady. "I need you to be honest with me." His eyes darkened, his expression hardening as he took a step back. "I am being honest. You need to trust me." The word trust hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to believe him. I wanted so badly to believe that everything was still right between us. But the shadows cast by his secrecy were growing too large to ignore. Without another word, he turned and walked into the kitchen, leaving me standing alone in the dim light of the living room, my heart pounding. As I sank into the couch, my mind raced. There was something lurking beneath the surface of our marriage, a darkness I could no longer pretend wasn't there. I felt my resolve hardening. I couldn't let this go on. I needed answers, no matter the cost. The next morning, as I sat on the edge of our neatly made bed, a sense of dread washed over me. The air felt thick with unspoken truths, and I could feel the weight of Eduardo's secrets pressing down on my chest. For days, I had been trying to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, but the more I tried to ignore it, the more it gnawed at me. I couldn't live like this anymore. I needed to know the truth. Taking a deep breath, I opened the drawer of Eduardo's nightstand, the cool wood smooth beneath my fingers. I had never been the type to snoop, but curiosity had morphed into something darker, a desperate need for clarity. As I rummaged through the clutter of old receipts and forgotten trinkets, my fingers brushed against something that didn't belong. A small, leather-bound notebook, its edges worn with use. My heart raced as I carefully opened it, Eduardo's neat handwriting scrawled across the pages. At first, it seemed harmless. Lists, reminders, things he needed to take care of. But as I flipped through the pages, I stumbled upon names and numbers that felt out of place. My stomach tightened with unease. "Eduardo," I whispered, his name tasting bitter on my lips. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. His footsteps, and I quickly shoved the notebook back into the drawer, slamming it shut just as he walked into the room. "Hey, you," he greeted me with a smile, leaning casually against the doorframe. His charm was still there, but it felt like a mask now, something that didn't quite fit. "What are you doing?" "Just organizing," I said, forcing a smile, trying to keep my voice steady. "How was work?" He shrugged. "Busy as usual," he replied, brushing it off as if nothing had changed. But the way he avoided my gaze, the way he seemed too nonchalant, set off alarms in my head. That night, I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, my mind whirling. The names I had seen in the notebook replayed in my head, a broken record I couldn't shut off. I needed to know more. The next morning, once Eduardo left for work, I opened my laptop and began my investigation. As the hours passed, I felt myself sinking deeper and deeper into a web of information, each new discovery tightening the knot in my chest. I searched his name, his company, even the names I had seen in that notebook. Slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. What I found made my blood run cold. Articles about financial scandals linked to Eduardo's company, names associated with fraud, corruption, and worse. As I clicked through documents and news reports, my heart pounded in disbelief. There, amidst the information, I found a name, a figure notorious for his ties to the criminal underworld, connected to fraudulent schemes and money laundering. "No," I whispered, my voice cracking. "No, no, no." The man I had married, the man I thought I knew so well, was tied to something dark and dangerous. My hands trembled as I printed out the articles, feeling like I was holding the key to a nightmare I wasn't ready to face. How could I confront him? What if I was wrong? But the evidence was undeniable. That evening, Eduardo came home, his usual warm smile on his face. He was so oblivious, so unaware of the storm brewing inside me. "Laura?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. "Are you okay?" I nodded, my throat tight. "We need to talk," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. His smile faltered, and I could see the shift in his eyes, unease creeping in. "About what?" I swallowed hard, my pulse racing. "About your past," I said. watching his expression darken as realization set in. I found some things that don't add up. His gaze locked onto mine, tension radiating from him like a physical force. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice low, but there was no mistaking the fear behind it. I felt tears welling in my eyes as I whispered, "Please, don't lie to me. I need to know the truth." In that moment, the air between us felt electric, charged with unspoken fears and the heavy weight of love fraying at the edges. The truth I was about to confront felt like a dagger hovering over my heart, ready to plunge into the fragile existence we had built. My pulse quickened as I stood in the dimly lit living room, clutching the crumpled papers I had discovered stashed in Eduardo's desk. The chandelier above cast long shadows, dark tendrils that mirrored the storm brewing inside me. Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating, broken only by the sound of my own heartbeat, pounding in my ears like a war drum. I had spent days wrestling with doubt, but now there was no turning back. It was time to demand answers. When Eduardo finally walked in, his easy smile cut through me like a knife. How could he look so composed when I was unraveling? "Hey, Laura, what's going on?" he asked, his voice light and casual, as if everything were normal. "Eduardo," I said, my voice trembling slightly. I took a breath, trying to steady myself, the papers crumpling in my clenched fist. "We need to talk." His smile faltered, just for a moment, before his expression hardened. "What is it?" he asked, stepping closer. I could see concern flicker in his eyes, but beneath that, something darker, defensiveness, maybe even fear. I slowly unfolded the papers, my hands shaking as I forced the words out. "These documents, I found them in your desk. They show your past, your involvement in financial fraud. And these names, these people, Eduardo, who are they?" My stomach twisted, and the words tasted bitter, heavy with accusation. Eduardo ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I had once found comforting but now felt like a warning. "Laura, it's not what you think," he said, his voice tight. "Those are just old connections. I haven't been involved in anything like that for years." "Not what I think," I echoed, disbelief sharp in my tone. "Eduardo, you've built our life on lies. You told me you left that world behind, that you were someone new. How could you hide this from me?" My voice cracked, the pain of betrayal hanging between us like a jagged knife. "I was protecting you," he shot back, his voice rising, frustration clear in every word. "I didn't want you worrying about things that don't matter anymore. I've worked hard to leave that behind, to build a future for us. I did this for us, Laura. Protecting me, or protecting yourself?" I countered, my heart aching as I faced the possibility that the man I loved was a stranger. "What else are you hiding, Eduardo? What else haven't you told me?" He took a step back, rubbing his face as though trying to erase the tension, his frustration palpable. "Laura, please. I'm not that person anymore. I've moved on from that life. You have to believe me." His voice softened, almost pleading. "I love you. I thought we could build a life together without dredging up the past." "Love?" I whispered, the word feeling hollow in my mouth. "How can I believe in your love when it's been built on deception? I feel like I don't even know who you are anymore." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I blinked them back, refusing to let him see my vulnerability. Eduardo shook his head, his expression a mix of desperation and anger. "I didn't want to lose you," he said quietly, his voice rough. "I thought if I just kept it all in the past, we could be happy. But now, look where we are. I can't just ignore this," I said, my voice trembling. "You've made me question everything we've built. What I thought was a solid foundation now feels like it's crumbling beneath me." I searched his eyes for any glimpse of the man I once loved, but the person staring back at me felt like a stranger. "I was going to tell you. I swear," he said, his voice faltering. "I just didn't know how." "How could you think I wouldn't find out?" I asked, my words barely above a whisper, my chest heavy with the weight of his betrayal. "You've put me in a position where I don't even know if I can trust you anymore." "Laura," he started, his voice tinged with pleading, but it only deepened the confusion swirling inside me. I felt like a ship lost at sea, tossed between waves of love and anger, desperately searching for a safe harbor. The silence that followed was deafening, thick with the unspoken realization that the love we once cherished was now entangled in a mess of lies and doubts. I took a step back, the room spinning as I looked at him. This man I thought I knew, now cloaked in shadows. "I need time," I said finally, my voice cracking under the weight of my decision. "I need to figure out if I can still trust you, if I can still love you." I stood in the center of our once happy home, the room still and eerily quiet. It was only weeks ago that we had hosted a dinner party here, filled with laughter and love, but now those memories mocked me. The warmth of our life together had been replaced by a chill that settled deep in my bones. How did it come to this? I whispered to myself, the question lingering in the air, unanswered. The walls of our home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison closing in around me. I tried to focus on my breathing, on calming the storm of emotions swirling inside, but the weight of Eduardo's secrets gnawed at me like a relentless predator. Where had the man I loved gone? The charming Eduardo, who had once held me close and whispered sweet promises into my ear, felt like a distant memory, someone I could no longer reach. The door creaked open behind me, and I stiffened. Eduardo walked in, his face a mixture of concern and determination. "Laura, we need to talk," he said, his voice steady, but urgency colored his words. His presence, once a source of comfort, now made my skin crawl. "Talk?" I spat, unable to contain the bitterness. "About what, Eduardo? Your lies? Your secrets? You've kept me in the dark for too long." He ran a hand through his hair, a familiar gesture that now felt rehearsed, a sign of his discomfort. "I know I've made mistakes," he said, his voice tight with regret, "but please, hear me out. I didn't want to burden you with my past. I thought I was protecting you." "Protecting me?" I laughed, the sound hollow and harsh in the empty room. "By keeping me in the dark? I feel more betrayed now than I ever thought possible. I don't even know who you are anymore." His face fell, the weight of my words hitting him like a blow. "I'm still the man you fell in love with," he said, his voice quiet. But the conviction was gone, and all I could see was a man desperately trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. Eduardo stepped closer, his eyes filled with desperation. "I love you, Laura. I made those choices years ago, thinking I could leave that life behind. Can't you see? I was trying to build a future with you, not drag you into my past." His words pierced through me, striking a deep chord. Part of me wanted to believe him, to forgive him, but every fiber of my being screamed in protest. "You don't understand," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "Love can't thrive on a foundation of lies. How am I supposed to forget everything? How can I ever trust you again?" Eduardo's shoulders slumped, and for the first time, I saw the weight of defeat in his eyes. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice hollow. "I'll change. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Just give me a chance." My heart ached at his plea, torn between the life we had built and the cracks that now threatened to tear us apart. I thought of the dreams we once shared, the love that had seemed unbreakable, but now that love felt like a delicate glass sculpture shattered at my feet. "I don't know if I can do that, Eduardo," I said softly, the uncertainty in my voice reflecting the turmoil in my heart. "I need time, time to think." His voice cracked, revealing the raw pain he was trying to hide. "Time? What does that mean for us? I can't lose you, Laura. You're everything to me." I stepped back, the distance between us growing not just physically but emotionally, too. "Maybe losing me is what you need to understand the weight of what you've done," I replied, my voice steadying as I confronted the reality of our situation. "I can't keep living in this uncertainty. I need clarity." Silence descended over us like a heavy blanket, suffocating and oppressive. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. Finally, I turned away from him, unable to bear the anguish in his eyes any longer. "I'm going to take a break from us," I whispered, each word cutting into the air like shards of glass. "I need to find myself again, away from all of this." Eduardo reached out, but I took another step back, my resolve hardening. "Please, don't," I said, my voice firm. Just give me space. Without waiting for his response, I walked out of the living room, leaving him standing there, a shadow of the man I once loved. As I closed the door behind me, the weight of my decision settled over me like an unbearable burden. Would I find the strength to reclaim my independence, or was this truly the end of our love story? Only time would tell. Sitting in a quaint little cafe days later, the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, but it did little to calm the storm brewing inside me. I had taken a break from everything: Eduardo, our home, the life we had built together, in an attempt to rediscover who I was outside of us. The clinking of cups and the murmur of conversation around me faded into the background as I reflected on the events that had led me here. Suddenly, a familiar voice broke through my thoughts. "Laura, is that really you?" I looked up to see Clara, an old friend from college I hadn't seen in years. Her presence felt like a breath of fresh air, a warmth chasing away the shadows clouding my heart. "Clara," I exclaimed, standing to hug her. "It's so good to see you." We settled into a corner table, and as we caught up, I felt a small flicker of joy rekindle within me. "I didn't know you were back in town," I said, surprised at how much I had missed her easy company. "Just visiting family," Clara replied with a smile. "I've missed this place and I've missed you. How have you been?" I hesitated, the weight of my recent heartbreak pressing down on me. "It's complicated," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm trying to figure things out after," I trailed off, unsure how to express the chaos of my emotions. "After what?" Clara leaned forward, her eyes filled with genuine concern. "You can tell me." I took a deep breath. "After discovering that my husband has been hiding a dark past, financial fraud, dangerous people. It feels like I don't even know him anymore." My chest tightened as I spoke, the words tumbling out in a flood of pain. "I thought we had a perfect marriage, but now, it all feels like a lie." Clara listened intently, her nods encouraging me to continue. "That sounds incredibly hard, Laura," she said, her voice gentle and empathetic. "You deserve honesty, especially from someone you love. But have you thought about what you want? Not just what's happening with him, but what you need for yourself." I pondered her words, my heart racing with the uncertainty of it all. "I don't know anymore. I feel lost. I thought I had everything figured out, but now—" I hesitated, staring into the dark swirl of my coffee. "I just want to feel whole again." "Maybe it's time to rediscover who you are without Eduardo," Clara suggested. "You've always been so passionate about art. Have you thought about getting back into it?" Her suggestion struck a chord deep within me. I had been an artist once, my canvas filled with vibrant colors and dreams. I hadn't picked up a paintbrush in years. "I used to love painting," I said softly, a small smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "It was my escape." "Then let's go for it." Clara's excitement was infectious. "Why don't we hit up an art supply store after this? You could create something that's entirely your own again." As we continued to talk, a sense of empowerment slowly returned to me. Clara reminded me of my strength, my creativity, and my ability to reclaim my life. That day, I left the cafe with renewed hope, the weight of doubt lifting just a little. Meanwhile, Eduardo was on his own journey. He sat in the quiet of a therapist's office, his hands trembling slightly as he faced the truth he had long avoided. "I never meant to hurt her," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "I was just scared of losing everything I had worked for." The therapist, a calm and steady presence, nodded thoughtfully. "What you built on lies is bound to crumble, Eduardo. You need to face your past if you want any hope of building a future with Laura." Eduardo's gaze fell to the floor, the enormity of his mistakes weighing on him. "I'm ready to change," he said, his voice resolute. "I want to be the man she thought I was, the man she deserves." Days turned into weeks as we both fought our separate battles. I threw myself into painting, letting colors splash across the canvas like an outpouring of all the emotions I had kept bottled inside. Eduardo, too, began to confront his demons, attending therapy regularly and working to rebuild himself from the ground up. Finally, the day came for us to meet again. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down my dress, my heart pounding with nerves. I thought about everything. Our love, our laughter, our pain. Could we really start over? Was there enough left to rebuild? When I saw Eduardo walking toward me, my breath caught in my throat. He looked different, more grounded, more at peace. "Laura," he said softly, his voice full of sincerity, "I've been working hard to change. I want to show you that I can be the man you deserve." Tears welled in my eyes as I searched his face, looking for signs of the man I once loved. "I've been finding myself, too, Eduardo," I replied, my voice shaking with emotion. "But it's going to take time to rebuild trust." "I understand," he said, and this time, I believed him. And we have reached the end of another story. If you liked it, leave in the comments what else you want to see here, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you support us.